All right, so in this tutorial, what I'm gonna do is just show you how to do kind of a switch. It's super handy for doing 2D animation because often what you want to do is try to blend from one pose to another pose, but they don't necessarily naturally go together. Okay, so for example, if I have two logo designs, get me on frame one. If I have these two logo designs, right, I want to switch from this to this. Very different, right? To be honest, like the style's different and the subject matter is completely different. So like this one has outlines, this doesn't. So it's not a great example, but I was just trying to think of things that be relevant. So and if I can make this work, then you can make anything work. Okay. So let's say we want to transition between the two. So what we do is we basically will create an animation with one and blend that animation into the next. And then it's kind of like sleight of hand. It will just naturally flow. So for example, it will look somewhat like this here. So our mind will make the transition between the two. Now, this, like I said, isn't necessarily the greatest example, but the idea is that you could have a character drawn in one pose with maybe their arms up or something, and then have another drawing with their arms down. And all you'd have to do is just kind of animate them moving up, and then maybe like an anticipation up, and then animate like just the whole thing going down. But then as it animates downwards, switch to the other drawing, and it will kind of blend. So that's the idea. Okay, so that's what we're going to do on this one. We're basically just do this. Okay, so first things first, you're going to need both your graphics. So I'm turning this one off. I have this one and this one. So I'm just going to grab them both, and I'm just going to Control C to copy. And I'm going to turn them off. You should already have your graphics, or you should make your graphics now if you want to do this little exercise. So I'll hit plus, make a new one, and we'll just call this, Cone to Cecil. Okay, so, and I'm just going to paste them here. I'm just going to Control Shift V. All right. And what we're going to do is I am going to take this and just try to center it. So modify array, align, and let's do horizontal center. I was hoping it would keep them together. That's pretty lame, because I would thought that it would have just thought those as one drawing, because whatever. Okay, so because these aren't symbols. All right, so these are just straight up drawings, by the way, too. You can do this with symbols as well, but it might just be slightly more limited. So what I'm going to do is just going to have this guy transition to this guy. I'm going to try and do it in fewer frames as not as much movement. So just do it much quicker going from one to the next, okay? So we want this to be a starting point, and then I'm just going to say that maybe at, maybe that's too many frames. We'll say maybe at frame 4, we're going to have a transition. So I'm just going to go here and hit F6. And what I want to do is on the first one here, you can see it's holding this drawing. I'm going to remove this section because that's going to be, and then I want it to come to here. So I'm going to get rid of this. So basically this drawing is now that one, and this drawing is that one. You can kind of see, right? So we have our two keyframes more or less. And what I want to do is just transition from this one to this guy. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and I'm just going to go to my next frame here. I'm just going to click on it. I'm going to hit F6, or you can right click and go, where are you? Insert keyframe. All right. Also, I didn't show you in the beginning. You could just hit F5, and that will extend the keyframes, or you right click and go insert frame. So I already had the span here, but just that's what you would do. Okay. So we're going to do that. I'm also going to turn on onion skinning. I'm not usually a huge fan of it, but in this case, it'll actually be a little bit helpful. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, Control plus, or Command plus if you're on a Mac. And I'm just going to move this way. I'm just going to grab it and move it over just real slightly. Okay, that's it. So just an ease in, sort of. Then we're going to do another one. And again, I'm going to click on here, and I'll hit F6, or you can right click, insert keyframe, make it much larger. Okay, and I'm going to move the pivot down here, and I'm going to try and just squash it. I'm just going to lean it a little bit this way and make it a little bit wider so that it goes boom, boom. And then here it's going to pop into this. Now, this is supposed to be my final transition. So I did 1, 2, 3. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3. I'm going to have to go one more. So I'm going to go to here, and I'm just going to hit F6. So that way I have that starting spot. And then what we're going to do is I'm also going to put one here, F6. So I just have the same drawing 3 times in a row. That way I can always come back to the regular here. So I want to try and make the transition when it's at the most movement. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and we're going to move its pivot down here too, just to make things a little bit easier. And I'm going to move it this way just a little bit so there's an overlap of masses. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shrink this down a little bit. Pull this down a little bit and go a little bit wider. I'm also thinking, to be honest, like this is a little bit too big. So let's just go like that. Yeah, so it's going to go boom, boom. And then what we're going to do is here, we're going to take this whole thing again. And I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller because it feels a little bit too big. I'm just holding shift as I scale. Okay. And this will be an overshoot, which means I'm going to, again, move the pivot down here. I'm going to scale it up a little bit, like so, and thin it up a little bit. So it goes from down to up. And then we will have the final one here, okay? And I forgot to move the pivot again, so move the pivot here. And yeah, these are just a little bit too big in general. That's all. Shouldn't have to scale. I should have made sure it was better scale to begin with. And then I'm just going to go ahead and move this just a little bit. So there's a little bit ease here, okay? Now, if you were to look, you should see, I'm actually going to take this too, because I'd like to see this guy for a second before he does the transition. So I'm just going to grab, click there, hold shift, click here. I'm just going to drag it over, let's say 2 frames, just so there's a pause, and then there's the motion, okay? And then what I'm going to do is turn this off and just make sure that we don't have any of the drawings here. Good. Okay. So now if we enter, you can see how we just basically transition from one shape to another shape. Pretty easy, right? Obviously we're literally just replacing a drawing, but by using the motion, we're able to sort of transition from one to the other. And this is doing something that is not in any way related. If you had just another drawing of this guy in like a different pose, this would work even better because your eye could fill in that gap even more so. And here we have a difference of color and style in wildly different shapes. But I like doing it just because you can see even with just as small of a thing as we have here, it still works to some extent, okay? And that is just called a switch, and it's super handy. You can do it with whole characters or whole symbols. You can also just do it with one piece of something. Either way, it generally works.